Hello and welcome to my tutorial on how to build and coaster in FVD. First of all, I'm going to show you some of the basic settings in FVD, and afterwards I'm going to NoLimits and finishing that coaster there. So let's get started. On the file you got new file, load a file, all the standard stuff. Under edit you got options. I'm using metric because I'm from Germany, as you might hear from my dialect accent. I'm using shadow quality medium, mesh quality extreme, standard setting over here, force open GL3 because I get weird issues if I set it to auto. Under visualize you can show different aspects of your ride like speed, forces, and how tight your turns are, this track flexion. And under help you got this nice and handy converter. For example, if you want to build a hypercoaster, you know now that it is a 61 meter tall ride. So let's get started. The first step you're gonna do is go on the unnamed track and go under properties. You got a friction parameter. You leave it as it is because it's pretty close to the standard value NoLimits 2 uses. And if you don't own NoLimits 2 Pro, you can't even change it. So leave it as it is. It's totally fine. It works in 99% of cases. There are only a few cases where you need to change it. But you can only change it in NoLimits if you got NoLimits Pro. You have your hardline height. The hardline height is the height of the hardline of a certain coaster type. For the coaster I'm building, I leave it at 1.1 meters. For example, Mack rides with the Blue Fire Trains uses 1.5 meters. A GCI wooden coaster or an Intermin two-seater in hypercoaster like Millennium Force or Expedition G-Force has 0.9 meters of hard line. For Trackstar, this is a purely visual setting in FVD and it doesn't carry over to NoLimits. You can go for the generic. This is like a modern single spine track by Vekoma or Intermin. You got generic flat, which is a flat two rail track. You got the old school Vekoma or Aero track. You got the B&M box track. You got the modern Intermin or Mack track or Gaslar. You got box, which is a small two. A box is like the quad rail track of the lift hill of Intimidator 305. You got small flat. Small flat is your small gauge 2-track design for like a wild mouse. Or you get double spine, the modern Intermin track found on Coaster or parts of Condor or Skyrush, like coasters like this. Since we are going to build an Intermin hypercoaster, I'm going to set this at double spine. For draw, I suggest you that you use everything. You can only render the track or the hardline. Leave it to everything. Everything works. Leave it as it is, and everything should work. So, the tips I'm going to give you are for every coaster style. I am building a very realistic approach, but it's not 100% realistic. There are ride systems out there which are extremely difficult to replicate. So I'm going to take a few creative liberties. And if I'm building an Intermin hypercoaster, it's more like an Intermin styled hypercoaster. It's not a real Intermin hypercoaster. So let's get started. First, you're gonna hit edit and this window pops open. You got the anchor setting. I'll explain it later. So now you get to add a new section. This section will be our station. And a station can be best used as a straight section. Now you get this thing. If you go over this window and press the right mouse button, you can look around. If you're going with WASD, you can move around. And with the mouse wheel, you can go up and down. There are some cases where your mouse cursor gets lost. This is pretty annoying in FVD, and it doesn't get fixed very easily, so you have to deal with it. If you get stuck like this and you can't get out. Oh, why is my coaster upside down? This thing has no sanity checks for angle control. So deal with it, but you get to use it extremely well. So let's cover a few basic settings you see on screen. You get your 10-meter section of track. You can see the length here. If you want to change it, you can either hit the arrow buttons right next to it, or you can use your mouse wheel. Everything in FVD has one nice feature, which makes it incredibly easy to build, which is you can hit your mouse for 1 meter steps or 0.3 steps, but I'm coming to it later. You can hold shift and move for a 10 meter step, or you can hold control for a 0.1 meter step. So a small step, middle step, and a big step. The section has a speed now fixed to 36 kilometers per hour. It doesn't matter. Everything you do in FVD from a speed-wise perspective doesn't carry over to NoLimits. You can change it to your desired speed, like type in 12 kilometers per hour. Also, if you type in numbers, it takes extremely long. I don't know why. So always move it with shift if you need high speed. You can change it. It doesn't really matter at all. So we want a section for the station which is 20 meters long. Now you can also change the height and the position of the start of the track. The start will be this part here, the anchor. You can go over here with X, Y, Z move. You can do stuff like this. I don't know what this does. I don't know what this does. And this is your orientation in decrease if you want to build multiple coasters with angles. Normal G's, I don't use those settings. I never use them and I don't know what they do. So let's make it of a height of station of 5 meters. Now let's add a lift hill. For lift hill, it's easiest to use the curved section. The curved section has a lot more options what you can do with it. For example, you can set the speed or take the fixed speed out of it. So the friction and the friction and the air friction are calculated. But use fixed speed, it works. It's fine. For track radius, this defines the size of the radius of your track. For example, this would be a 10 meter radius turn. For an Intamin Hyper, I usually go for 10 meters of radius. For total angle, you can change the angle of your ride, of the curve. Been taking a 45-degree step up. Direction is in which direction the curve goes. If you take it at 0 degrees, it goes up. If you take it at minus 90, it goes to the right. And this goes down. So you can also do steps in the middle, but for the ease of use, just make a straight section up. Lead in and lead out here are two settings which are how rapid your turn is going to start. If you hit space while in the movement mode, so right click on here on this window and hit space, you can use your coaster or drive with it. With shift you speed up, with control you slow down. You now see that this is a pretty gentle turn. Let's make it match the speed, and this is pretty gentle turn upwards. It works fine. If you take the lead out, it's pretty abrupt. So let's make it to a lead in of 10 meters, 10 degrees, and a lead out of 10 degrees. Now add the straight section. The straight section can be as long as you want. as short as you want. The limit is 0.1 meters. And every time you see this section, you see this section is a red section. The other blue stuff is already built and it works. Now you got a few different data on display. You got the X coordinate, your Y coordinate, your Z coordinate. Your Y coordinate is your height. You got roll, which is your banking angle. Your pitch is your upwards, downwards angle. And your yaw is your left-right angle. So we're going up with a 45 degree. And those little inconsistencies are there. I don't know why. Get used to it. It doesn't get any easier. So let's make the section a little bit longer, like 58.659 meters. And you can go up it. This is with a speed of 36 kilometers per hour. You can go it up, you can go it down. It doesn't matter. This doesn't define the lift speed of your coaster. Now, at top of your lift hill, you make a curved section. Yet again. A personal tip, try to match the track radius. Like if you have a 10 meter radius turn down there, make a 10 meter turn up there. It makes it a lot more realistic. The direction we are going to use is minus 180 degrees or minus 180. It doesn't really matter in this case. The angle should be around 5 to 15 degrees down. You see, this pitch is minus 15 degrees. And you have to remove the let out at the top of your lift hill. Now let's take a look. And you see we're going way too fast here. And you're seeing that this small hill generates minus 0.146 Gs. This would be a floater airtime hill. Or light ejector airtime. And it's one of the only parts where the speed of a coaster in FVD really matters, because it defines the final speed your coaster will have in the NoLimits 2 simulation. For ease of use, I'm going to go with 18 kilometers per hour, which is a speed which is not too fast, not too slow. For an Intermin Hyper, it's totally fine. This really depends on your coaster. Like if you're building a GCI wooden coaster, those go a lot slower. If you're going to build a Intermin prefabricated wooden coaster with a cable lift, you're going to go there up fast. So 18 kilometers per hour, perfect speed for this kind of ride. Now let's get to the meat of FVD. Let's add a force section. The force section is a completely different approach to building coasters like you probably ever had. Something like Planet Coaster or Roller Coaster Tycoon or Parkitect have geometric sections, which means you say, okay, this section is 10 meters long. It makes a 45 degree turn and turns and rolls 45 degrees. FVD works differently. You give the program the forces you want the rider to experience, and it calculates the rest of the track automatically for you. So you got those three graphs. You got a blue graph, which is your normal graph, aka your vertical Gs. You got your red graph. The red graph is your roll rate, not your rolling angle, but I'll get to this later. And you get your green, which is your lateral graph. Those have settings on the left. I'm going to go over them in shortly. So, like this ride would now go, have 0.6 Gs, and this element, if we would make it longer, would hold 0.68 Gs for as long as you can. But a drop like this would be pretty boring. So let's change the values. For length, you can define the length of one of those graphs. You can select them by clicking on them. Let's make it a 1 second long graph and go for 0G. And another hint, if your right doesn't feel smooth, like you're going from 4Gs to -1G, this doesn't feel good. Make it smooth and gentle as possible. You can see the pitch rate here. This shouldn't surpass 50, 60 degrees on the first drop, because this feels a lot more gradual and it feels great. It looks great. So if you want to extend your section, you click on append. Yeah, now you see you got your 0G approach and it holds now 0Gs, but the track doesn't get any longer. It's pretty easy to fix. You got two options. First option is increase the length of a section to 2 seconds, like this. And now it renders the rest of your track. And now you got this approach. But you see, this has a small bump here. Like, here's the bump with 40 degrees. Let's move this out. One option to smoothing this out is extending the section. If you extend the section, you get a lot smoother approach. Longer sections are generally smoother. But to be honest, this doesn't look like an intermediate drop. So let's increase the forces. And now you see we're going to minus 0.3 Gs. And this looks more like an intermediate drop, like something like Hyperion. But extending those sections is pretty time consuming because you have to think about it every time you do it. So you can set it to dynamic. Dynamic allows you to set 2 of those tracks, which dynamically rescale in time. I usually, and I strongly suggest you do the same, set the lateral graph to dynamic and never touch it again during a ride, which doesn't specifically require you to use lateral forces. You will still feel lateral forces on this ride, but you won't build them in the layout. This has some reason, because lateral forces are pretty uncommon on most rides, except those, because the calculations are a bit funky. You still get them if you train turns, for example, but you won't experience a lot of lateral forces. So if you want to hide the lateral graph, go from transition editor to graph list, click on editable graphs and hit the lateral graph. Now it doesn't even appear in the list. It's pretty good. Now to build the next section, hit append and let's go to, let's say 4Gs. And this looks like a good drop, and hit append. Now you see we got some spare room down there. Click on this track and with control and mouse wheel you can now set it like this, so it goes pretty close to the floor. And let's again watch this track. Yep, beautiful. This feels like a good drop. We got a maximum angle of around 85 degrees. This is good. Okay. Let's make an airtime hill next. For an airtime hill, like the first airtime hill on pretty much every Intamin hypercoaster, let's build it to an angle of around 60 degrees. Yeah. And append. And you see, it would try to make a loop because it tries to hold 4 Gs. But this is not what we want. So we're changing this to -1. This doesn't look right at all. But it's easy fix. We go over here and change it until we hit 65 to 70 degrees here. Now watch. Go in the first drop, valet, and like this. This looks pretty smooth too. So, hit the layer sections and append. Another thing to note, and this is pretty important for coasters with such hills, we have it 65 degrees over here. So we are stretching the section out to be around 65 degrees here. That the entrance angle and the exit angle are pretty much the same. You can go make it pretty exact, but you don't have to. So let's append. And now go up to 4 Gs again. And what's the next element? I feel like building something like a turn, like the first hill of Silverstar next. So you can change the duration of your airtime here to make it go as close to the ground as possible. And now go to around 40 degrees. Now let's hit this roll grave. Uncheck dynamic. Make it around a second shorter. And now you can make a turn. If you roll it, you see that it makes a turn. If you roll it the other way, like +70 or +90, it makes like this. So let's check this airtime hill. Looks magnificent. And you see, this isn't the smoothest hill because quartic sections for hills are not the best. You got a few options. The easiest option is quartic, but it doesn't look good. You can go to my older style, my older videos on my channel and watch how this feels. It's not the best. I strongly suggest using either sinus or quintic. And as you see here, this is a one-way function. Excuse me. So, this is a one-way function. So, we are going in this curve and now we turn. Append and make it longer. But as you can see, we are now turning with the same constant rate. So you have to remove your 80 degree roll rate with a -80 degree comment. And now you got like a steep overbank. But 80 degrees are a little bit too much. So let's change the first to 40. The second one to 40. And this looks a lot more like a Silverstar turn. And now let's make this 1 second shorter. Append and let's say 0.5 Gs. This looks good, but now we're stuck here. So take this graph and turn it to 80 degrees, 90 degrees, as much as you want, and hit append. And hit append on this one, because we are out of dynamic setting. And you see, we are turning. And if we now make this section like this, we stop turning. But we're not, the roll angle is too high. So let's hit prepend. Prepend puts a section before the section you just marked, red or blue in some cases, and append makes it afterwards. So you see, let's extend the section, and we are now turning and overturning a little bit. That's not a problem. If we shorten this section and going as close to 0 as possible, and now this looks better. Append this, make this longer, and set it back to dynamic. Okay, and go to 4 Gs, append this, make it go as slow as possible, and now we got a pretty decent turn. For my liking, it holds you to the left a little bit too much, but that's not that big of a problem in this case of a tutorial. One thing to warn you about, if you think, maybe I could change this, as you can see, the changes to earlier parts of a ride, like this part, affect the whole ride, but you can't change things after you build them easily. So, what's next? I would say a small airtime hill. But a small but strong airtime hill. And go to 10 to 15 degrees, append, and make it to 0.8 seconds. And now minus 1.2. Like this, and this beetle, like you find on some B&M rides. 0.8. Like going from diesel, and a little bit more aggressive. Feels good, looks good, perfect. So, let's build some sort of helix now. Append this section, and now you have to uncheck dynamic again, and we have to start around in the middle of this transition from minus 1.2 to 3.8, and append, and now we're going for a quintic section. And some a little bit more snappy, 100 degrees per second. You can go to 150 depending on the type of element you're building, but 100 is a smooth ride experience. But this won't be a low turning helix. This will be a overbank. So let's move this element, this long element here. Let's move it a bit earlier, so while you're descending from this hill, you turn, and now 100 degrees, and the other way around. So now you have to fill around like this, and you see we are going down at the end. So we have to lower the turn rate a little bit. And now we are cooking with a pitch angle of around 0. Make the section longer, append here. And now you can fiddle around a little bit and tune it to your liking. You can shorten this. And now let's take a look. From this airtime hill and this sharp turn. Perfect. You now run into the issues of holding sustained G forces. This is quite interesting table I can link in the description of this video. But the short explanation, 4 Gs you can hold for 4 to 5 seconds if you're going for I305 intensity. 5 Gs you can hold for around 1 second, and 6 Gs you can hold for around 0.1 or 2 seconds. So avoid building 6G rides. It doesn't really look good. Also avoid turn rates over 500. It looks not good. Let's make this a sweet, long, sustained turn of 3 seconds. And now one of the strong best things about FVD comes into play. You want a section with 3 seconds of sustained positive forces. It's quite a hassle to build in something like NL2 Coaster, but now you got this section. From this point to this point, you got sustained 3.8 Gs. It's good, it works, it's pretty simple. Perfect. Now let's build. What can we build next? Oh, something like a snap, maybe found on Maverick. To build something like a snap, you go for 0.6. Try to hit 0G, around 0G, or airtime, ejector air, if you prefer it that way. But I'm going for this easier snap. Make it a little bit longer, so start it earlier. 0.5, quintic, and now we turn with 120 degrees. Append, and now you see this doesn't look right. So let's make it 0.2 seconds. Append 0.5 or 6 seconds. Turn back. And now you can make 0.1 seconds here and 0.6 here. And now we're clipping in the ground. And it's not really that of a snappy turn, but I still like it. So to fix this, you can move around this thing. Now let's watch this turn. You got sustained G's and this snap to straight. This looks decent. But if you want to make it even nastier, make this a little bit longer. Like this. Now append this part and append this part. Now take a look. This doesn't look too bad. But it's still not the smoothest. So, how to fix this? Make this section 0.2, 0.3 seconds longer. 1, 2, 3 longer. And go for center. Center determines the middle point of your section. you want this to be around 0.5. Let's make this longer too. And this negative 0.5. And I want to exit it with a 40 degree. Now, this section is a lot smoother. And it feels good. So, now let's build an outer bank. An outer bank over this hill. For an outer bank, it's pretty simple. Outer banks are pretty much banked airtime hills. And 0.1. No. Yes. And this won't be a typical overbank. This will be more of a wave turn. But seriously, FVD is about testing new stuff and not about really knowing what you're doing, especially in the beginning. So, append the section, and now you get this wave turn like overbank. I'm going to build this right pretty short, so you don't have to listen to my voice that much longer. So, turn off dynamic. I'm going to speed this a little bit up. And now we turn back to 0 for a nasty airtime hill. Make it as short as possible. And quadratic. As you can see, we have a roll angle of 0.4, which is good. And now we add forces back in. And now we append. And we're clipping in the floor, so make it shorter. Good. So now let's watch the section play together. We got a snap, we got those outer bank, and perfect. But I don't like this turn here. It feels too fast. It has to be a little bit more fluid. So extend those sections here. Extend this section here. And make it 0.4 and 0.4. Can zoom in on this part and now try to hit as close to 0 as possible on the roll angle. Yeah, this looks a lot better. As you can see, we got a turn rate of 0 here. If for some reason all your elements are doing some funky stuff like turning in a very slow rate, you got a negative angle here. This is your change in roll angle per second. Just an easy fix is to add a section with the exact opposite of this value and it should be fine. Let's take another look at this. Going in. Perfect. Now let's go for an even more crazy airtime here. Let's go for 0.8. Make this a dynamic section so you don't have to worry about it. And let's only go to 0.8. Now I'm going to tell you a secret for some extra spicy airtime hits. You're going to append it. You have to remember the 55. Now set it to quadratic, symmetric function, and give it 0.4. This function looks like this. And make it as long until you hit the 55. This airtime hill starts out weaker, but pulls you at the top. This is something found on Fluch von Novgorod at Hansa Park. So, let's add another section. And we are on our way to a station. So, let's fix this a little bit, and yes, this looks good. Now let's try to be pretty aligned to the station and have some bunny hills at the end. But how do we align ourselves to the end of the station? Simply with a stangle dive. So, stangle dive, you can build one like this. Try to hit for 0 Gs in a pretty short time. Make the dynamic off. Turn with pretty high speed. Like this. Make it longer. Turn off the rate by building it like this. Yes, so. And now you have to fiddle around a little bit. I make this longer, and this is a lot of practice. How to build those kinds of elements, it's up to you. There are a lot of ways, but this doesn't look half as bad as I mentioned. So let's make it a little bit, let's turn over slowly. That's too slow. Like we're going over this. Stangle dive into double down. This sounds good. So negative forces. For double down, I should say 3.5 Gs on this coaster. And now cancel out the roll. If your roll rate isn't going down, make the section a little bit shorter so you can fine tune it to your liking. As 0. Now make this thing -1 Gs, and you see this doesn't look right, so remove this part. And we're pretty close and pretty straight to this section, but we want to make it really, really straight. You have to fiddle around a little bit with the values, and you don't have to be this exact to do something like this. Like, let's turn. Okay, this looks good. Make this dynamic, since we only building this one, and 0.6 into 4 Gs. This isn't really a double down, but kind of works. Now let's watch this whole section. We're going sustain Gs, little stangle dive Yes. This looks good. So, add another bunny hill. You know the drill by now. 22, 22. And now good. Now we want to add a brake section. Brake sections are a little bit more tricky. And since I'm pretty strict with my roll rates and all, I try to change sections immediately beforehand, so I get to as close to 0 as possible, to -2 degrees, and to pretty much exactly 0 yaw. So this is close enough for the final approach. Let's build a 2 section, and now -6. Okay, no, this has to be a little bit longer. Depends. You know what? We're building an old school intermediate brake run. 0.4. And now you have the section needs to be pretty short. And now you have to go to around 1G. And you want something like 6 degrees here. Yes, this looks fine. And now you're done with the coaster. Now you have to add the brake run. Brake runs are super dependent on your patience. I'm a pretty experienced builder, so I put a lot of time in those. And so make this the brakes, and we're aiming for 5 meters here. Don't go under it. Over it is less of a problem, but don't go under it. So now to add the final section of FVD, geometric sections. Geometric sections are pretty strange, pretty useless in most cases, but they have some uses where a 4 section is unnecessary. So you got 3 graphs: red, yellow, and blue. Red is roll, yellow is yaw, and blue is pitch. Now we're going to eliminate the unnecessary values here. So we need to remove 6 pitch. You can do this like that, and with some fine tuning, take the number closest to 0. Now you can change the center with control, and now you can add the tension. The tension is the finest control, and you know the closest to 0 if changing the tension by 1 flips the sign. So now let's remove all roll rate. Okay, this is too much. Let's make the section shorter, like this, and make it like that, and okay. Nope, needs a little bit longer. And now we don't have any roll left, and now you have to adjust the yaw. Okay, this should come pretty close, and now you got your 180. Check with tension. This looks pretty good. So let's adjust the height of the section. This goes easiest by putting a straight section in front of this whole thing. And now you need to select this section here. Position yourself on this section and adjust the length. We're going to 5 meters or a little bit over 5 meters. Like this. Now you need to add curve section. 10-meter radius works pretty well. And we're going for 225 degrees. And you see it's a little bit close. So add 5 meters or 10 meters here. This isn't my best station I've ever built, but it works. 5 meters here. Curved section. Direction 90. Wing angle 45. 10 meters. And now you adjust it until it looks pretty close. You can also watch the shadows. The shadows are a nice way to find out a lot of things. Like this shadow is absolutely centered. This one isn't. If you want to be extra good, you can change the lead in and lead out. And now we're cooking. We got an offset of 0.1 now. Yes, like this. And that's it. You've built your first coaster on FVD. Let's take a look at the FVD variant coaster and then jump over to NoLimits. So shift over this hill. Remember, it's pretty important that this speed is set right. So good drop and a good airtime hill. Okay, and this sustained turn. This outer bank wave turn thingy. Okay, this hill, and into the brake run. Perfect. So, first step first, save this coaster. Don't export it. Sometimes FVD crashes if you're trying to export a coaster. So, first save it. Let's give it a popping name. Intermin tutorial. Now we export it. Export as. Export from section 0 to section 11. Or the section your coaster, amount of sections your coaster has. No limits to exporter, threshold for roll, leave it as it is, it works fine. Export, intermin tutorial. So, let's open up NoLimits. And take a look. You're going to hit editor, file, new, give it the same name as usually. For coasters, we're going for new coaster. I'm going to call it int. You're going to style. Let's use the rocket coaster. It's the double spine type. Type 1 type new. Doesn't really matter. Mode, we're going with the NL2 to default. Outline of current coaster style. Drag length, yeah, this looks good. Colors, I don't care. And okay. Now you're going to elements, add element, going to file system and navigate to the folder where all your rights in. So let's find this thing. Intermin As you might see, I've built quite a few rides. So, and now your ride is inside NoLimits. So you see this ride clips a little bit in the floor. You go to coaster, move Y around 1 meter. We've got another clipping here. Now it looks good. You can hit spacebar, control to connect them, drag, connect, and now it's done. Add a type separator here, add a type separator here, add a type separator here, and here, and here. Okay, this leave empty, here, here, and here. So first we're going to define this as a station. We're going to define this as a lift hill. We're going to define this as a brake. We're going to define this as a brake. And we're going to define this as a brake. So now, if you want to do it, you can do it this. You're going to split up, double click on this value, copy, element, special tracks, transfer table, click on it, special track properties, paste it here. Now it's turned 100 degrees. I adjust using the snap function over here. Make it as close as possible. Make it 16 meters long. You can change it to top view to get a better view. If your alignment is good, if you really want to mark your whole coaster and track this on a line, so you get this alignment right, track, connect, perspective view. Okay, we default track, current track 1. This is pretty important. Now make this a normal track. We might need some reels, but not now. Sometimes it moves your station and this around, so go check for this section brake. So we want some brakes here. We're going for magnetic brakes because magnetic brakes are pretty good. On this ride, it's pretty lame because those don't have different textures. You could change it, but for the sake of argument, you can play around with it. You can make this a B&M trick, and you can see it pretty easily for you. But you see that your speed graph, I have the speed comp on, your ride won't stop hard enough. So make this a 1.2 deceleration. Now we're cooking. Friction brake to 30 kilometers per hour. Yeah, this turn would hurt like hell. Yeah. If you look at this number on such a hill, I would set it to 1. This is the amount the coaster brakes harder than it needs to. So if you go on 36, it brakes you down to 35 and lets you speed up until 36 to brake you down to 35. If you set this to 31, you brake 5 kilometers harder than you used to. So the brakes don't tap often. It's some stuff you get used to. So we need another set of drive tires. This is transport with 18 enable transport device, 12 acceleration 2, deceleration 2. Perfect. Now this needs 12, deceleration 0, acceleration 0.2. If you want, I can do a video about all those settings, a little bit more detail. But your ride will work without all this fancy stuff back here. So, yeah. And now we had 18 kilometers per hour for the lift hill. So station transport 18. If you want to be a little bit more exact, you can go for 12 because the entrance speed is 12. 0.2, 0.2, 18 works like a charm. Set is centered so you can use your brake section, insert rotates and here. Make it a little bit longer. Section storage. Now you got storage tracks. This is a block for coaster. You can use three cars on this ride. So this looks great. Go for freeze. Let's unplug my controller before it goes haywire. You can go to leave editor or Alt X, save, and go to play. This is the normal view. I prefer the view called flyby. You go to it by hitting Q in the newest patch. Now you can move and get yourself close to the front bumper and enjoy the ride. With F2 you can bring this window up. So, as you might have seen, your values aren't exact. That's because NoLimits calculates the forces way better than FVD. FVD calculates the forces based on the middle of your train. And the front row or back row experience slightly different forces. So you have to get used to it, and it works fine. Now, for example, I wouldn't do it like this. And yeah, that's the ride. If you want to throw some supports on it, you have to unfreeze the ride. And supports, choose prefab, and there are some prefabs. They work pretty good. Like, yeah, you won't win any prizes with it for realism, but yeah, that doesn't take too long to throw some supports on your ride. You can move those around. If you want to set them a little bit more accurate, you can atomize them. Then can you move everything around? But that's not the purpose of this video. So now you got a working rod. You can now go and NoLimits too, where there are a lot more tutorials about it, and enjoy this pretty simple program. So it only took us 1 hour and 3 minutes to build this hypercoaster, and yeah, it's a lot easier than a lot of people think. I think it's easier than building a decent coaster in Plain Coaster. Like, this ride would be absolutely impossible to build in Plain Coaster. I don't think you can build some stuff like that. Like, this is way too smooth, and building a smooth ride in Plain Coaster takes a long time. And like this, 1 hour, it's fine. It's good. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you want, I can bring up some follow-up tutorials, like setting different brake types, how different layouts works, and how you can build more details in your ride. But for now, this is it. This is everything you need to know to build a whole coaster in NoLimits. And I hope you enjoyed this. Give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel for more updates. And I see you again.